Hello and welcome to today's episode of Rainer on Leadership, your online home for leadership lessons and advice for the local church. I'm your host, Sam Rainer. I have with me the one and only Thom Rainer, the founder and CEO of Church Answers. And we're going to be talking about big reasons why churches fall.
It's going to be sobering. It is going to be sincere, and it's going to be scintillating.
Okay. That's, now all that you need is a poem, and you'll have a sermon.
Yes.
Three points and a poem.
I was alliterating well. I'm recording this in the Nashville area as I speak, and there's a nice windstorm going over there. So if you happen to see some windows broken through or something like that during this, I'll just ignore it. Just we'll continue to record. But it's getting really windy out there.
Well, and at the time of this recording, storms are moving through pretty much nationally, and they hit Texas, they hit Louisiana, and I just, I'm sure more stories will come out about what I saw on social media. But there was the tornado that hit Texas. It hit that truck. It spun it around, flipped it over, and then it rolled back over and just drove home. Did you see that?
I did not. That's hilarious.
That's how Texans roll. The truck was literally rolling in the middle of a tornado. It flipped back right side up and then just drove home. It's just like, man, scratched my truck up.
That's hilarious. Well, hey, say a word about Southeastern, and we're going to talk about the 3 big reasons churches fail.
Yeah, we're certainly glad to have Southeastern as a sponsor. They're committed to helping you get the training you need to pursue your ministry from anywhere around the world. And they're going to waive the application fee. If you've been listening to the show, you've probably heard this, but many of you may be considering seminary education. So go to sebts.edu, walk through all the programs. They got all sorts of great programs. When you go to apply, put the coupon code Church Answers, all one word, Church Answers, and they'll waive the fee. No matter what stage of life's journey you find yourself in, Southeastern wants to help you take that next step in getting equipped so that you can disciple and you can teach others. And what I love about Southeastern Seminary is that it's not just about theological education, but also ministry preparation. So explore degrees, schedule a visit, and apply online at sebts.edu. So let's talk about
when you start talking about church failure, Sam, you can look at many different ways to categorize it. I'm looking big bucket here. I'm looking attitudinal more than anything. I mean, a church may fail because there's no longer any people in the community. That's rare, but it might fail because there's demographic issues. These are 3 of the big attitudinal issues. I've seen a lot of research done on these. HBR, Harvard Business Review, has done research. Some of this would be evident in some of the to good to great, Jim Collins, and why great companies fail. He talks about that as well. So it's this type of work has been done in the secular world, but it's true in the church world as well. There are many factors that can cause a church to fail, or to fall. But these are the big 3, and it's the attitude is not necessarily any one person. It is the collective personality of the church, and so those are 3 we will look. And this first one, Sam, is not as pervasive as it was pre-pandemic. I'm trying not to be alliterative, but it just keeps on coming. Pervasive pre-pandemic. Everything's problematic. So I'm trying to think of other words that are not peace. But post-pandemic, we're not seeing the hubris as much as we were before. Now, what is hubris? It is an attitude that you are better than. It's a haughty attitude. I don't know if you've got a better description of hubris than I do, Sam.
Well, yeah, I think it's the attitude of pride. Yeah. And often I think hubris is more seen and felt by others. Pride can be very internal. I mean, sometimes it's difficult to know motive and whether or not a person's prideful. But I think when you say hubris, and I know there's a lot of similarities there, I think it's kind of the expression of pride is the way I would describe it. I'm sure some linguists can tell me I'm getting the definition off, but that's how
I think you're dead on. Um, I read a book about GM many, many years ago. I don't remember the name of the book. I'm not going to try to remember it. But I ended up doing an article, a podcast on that book because it had such an impact upon me, even though I can't remember the name of it. And one of the reasons that it talked about the failure, the bankruptcy of GM was hubris. They thought they were too good to fail. After all, we're GM. And so I wrote that article, and guess who responded? The author
Oh,
turned around and responded. And he said, "You've got it exactly right." He said, "You understand the essence of the book more than even some of the then GM executives understand the essence of the book." So hubris. Let's think about some situations where hubris would be evident in churches. Historically, if you have been first church of a denomination, First Methodist, First Presbyterian, First Nazarene, First Baptist, there could be hubris that we are the first church in town, whatever that may be. I don't see that as much. I did see it pervasively in the 80s and 90s, Sam.
yeah, and I think you see this a lot when churches are in transition, and I know that I've seen it in my world as churches are looking for a pastor. They oversell who they really are and
That is so true.
where they really
That's
are.
such a good point. Hubris shows up in the search process. You're exactly right.
I think that's where you find it most is, well, of course. I mean, throw a big name out there. I mean, I hate to do it because, of course,
Yeah, no, no, don't
Of course, Alistair Begg should be our pastor. Of course he should. And he will probably consider us. It's that kind of hubris where I say that because I think very fondly of Alistair Begg, and he's done quite a good job there up in Cleveland. He's not coming to your church. He's not, you can ask, sure, it's your right to ask, but he's not.
You're saying it because he's one of mine and your favorite pastors.
Yeah, I didn't want to. I want to be, sometimes we have to be careful about the names that we throw out there, but they oversell themselves. They think more highly of themselves than they should, and I think that you see that a lot in the search process.
And what is happening? We are hearing from search committees or similar types of bodies, and they're saying we're getting all these resumes, but they don't live up to our standard.
Yeah.
We can't find we don't know why the person that we think should be applying is not applying, whatever that looks like. And you're exactly right. I do think that hubris is showing up a whole lot in transition from one pastor to another.
Yeah, and I'm all about having high standards. I'm not saying, you should have low standards, but I think that some churches do have a culture of, well, we are, and then fill in the blank, that first church, or we are, XYZ. And a lot of it's tied to past successes.
Exactly.
And I think that pride really surfaces strongly when churches are relying on past successes to define their identity.
Well, let's go back to the denominational issue, because that has been one of them. If you're the first church of any type of denomination, in the 70s, maybe somewhat into the 80s, started waning into the 90s, people would move to a town, a community, and they would choose their denominational church. And their first choice would usually be, well, we have to first go to the first church. And if that doesn't fit, we'll go to another one. But we always first go to the first church. And so there was this pattern in the past that people came to your church just because you were first, fill in the denominational blank. And that's not happening today. People are not choosing a church because it's first denominational, and many of them aren't choosing it because it's denominational at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. And a lot of people are just now selecting churches based upon the individual church. There's very little outside influence that's affecting. I see it in our membership class all the time. We had a very good membership class.
You had over 50 in your last membership class.
It was great. It was great. And the questions that they're bringing to the table are very different than the questions that I saw almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Nobody asks about the denomination, and frankly, very few care. Now, maybe they should, and I'm not saying this is a qualitative statement. I'm just saying it's where people are right now.
It's reality. So hubris I think that has been more common in the past than in the present, but I also think you nailed it when you said it's still common with search committees that are shocked that the 20 best, whatever, however you define a best pastor, the 20 best pastors in America aren't applying for this church.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll just say this generally. I think that you see a lot of hubris in our culture, not just in the church, but in our culture, because we don't value humility. I mean,
Mm.
when you go to a job interview, it's not like your potential boss is looking, for, they're not going to press into humility. They're not going to ask you about that. We don't put posters on walls of humble people. Social media algorithms don't value humility. Ask pastors about their favorite preachers. Not many are going to highlight humility. Nobody gets famous because of humility. And I think that we're seeing that hubris just infiltrate the church as well.
Hey, this is a little off the path, but can you think of I can. When I think of a large church pastor that embodied humility, I think of Bob Russell when he was Southeast Christian for many years.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
ironically, I'm sure a lot of our listeners probably don't even know who he is.
because he's so humble.
Yeah,
He was
some
pastor
will.
of
I
one
mean,
of the largest.
there's some listeners who will know exactly who that is, but others will not. There's a lot of great humble pastors that are out there. I think of Tim Boyd. He's 1 mile down the road. I hate to mention him because we kind of compete for members when they're new to the community because we're
You
1
don't
mile.
compete.
I know. I'm just joking. Tim's great. I don't even know if he listens to the podcast. But he's a very humble pastor. He's an incredibly humble pastor, and I'm learning from him. They're out there. There are plenty of them that are out there, but they don't get the recognition because we don't value humility.
That is so well stated. The second reason great churches do fall, is denial. And that is basically you don't see that things are getting worse than they are, that you don't see the progressive trends. They're all kind of metaphors, the eating of the elephant trend or the slow erosion at the beach or something like that. The erosion has been so subtle. If you've been there a while, you don't see the problem or you're unwilling to see the problem. So many churches fail because by the time they say, oh, we're in trouble, it's too late. And like could have been done before then.
Oh yeah. I think a great example of this is Southside, the church that we ended up adopting, and good people there. And I think the world of them, but as a whole, there was a lot of denial as to how bad it really was until it got to that point. And it's a big wake up call when you've been in denial for so long and you finally realize we have got to do something. It's a very harsh wake up call for a lot of churches. Now, in the case of Southside, their leaders did the right thing. They moved quickly, and the church is now doing very well.
They started asking you for help. They got fostering.
Well, and
then you adopted them.
One of the first steps how do you get out of how do you know you're no longer in denial? Well, you ask for help. I mean, that's one of the first steps is I need help.
Exactly.
And churches need to ask for help. And you know why they don't? Point number one, hubris, pride.
Hubris.
They very much go together. Prideful people, prideful churches are often in denial about who they really are and where they really are and how healthy they really are. I think it's hard to detach denial from hubris. I think they're very different things, of course, but they go hand in hand with church health.
Well, I'm involved in a consultation. I won't even note the state. I'll just say, but it is a First Church, and interviewing the members, the other consultants and I interviewing the members, we're finding that denial. No, we're such and such church. We're going to be fine. No, you're not. Let me give you the reality that is
remember the consultation we did where we reported their numbers back to them and they denied.
And they said we were lying.
Yeah. These aren't the right numbers.
Life.
These are the numbers you gave us. They're not the right numbers. These are literally the numbers you gave us. Well, they're not the right numbers. Well, what are the right numbers? I don't know, but not those. It's like, well, these are your numbers. That's denial.
And we gave them like, if I recall correctly, like a 10-year trend, and it had been cut more than half, and most of the congregation
Oh
did
yeah,
not know.
the trend was down when we plotted it out on a graph for them, which was hilarious. It's a very simple exercise. You're like, no, that's not right. Well, but you gave us these numbers, but that's not right. We're not in decline. Okay,
Yeah.
it's like you need to ask for help.
And let me mention this. One of the reasons we created our no array of resources, and we will have more, but we currently got Know Your Church, Know Your Community, and Know Yourself, which has been our Revitalizer profile. But the Know Your Community and the Know Your Church report, those are the types of tools that we get to churches to help them to see reality. One is, do you look like your community? We'll get a Know Your Community report to find out if you really do, because most churches do not. The other one, Know Your Church. Find out what really the perception of your church is on the inside, and you're going to be surprised. Both of them are reality checks, and that's of course I'm biased on this, Sam, but I believe churches should be doing both reports on a regular basis. I would do Know Your Community about once a year. I would do Know Your Community. I probably do Know Your Church once a year for at least a season to see if the attitude is beginning to shift.
I agree. Both reports are very valuable. I realize it's hard to ask your members to participate, but the good thing about Know Your Church is you can use it with different groups as well. You can sample different groups.
Yes, we have that option available. Okay, why do great churches fall? Why? What's the reason for the failure? What is taking place? Hubris, the pride, maybe even the arrogance that is there. Secondly, denial. They don't see what's going on, and so they're not only unwilling to make the change, but they don't know that they need to make the change because they're not seeing it. And then finally, these are all related to each other somehow. Nostalgia. So many churches.
Nostalgia. I say nostalgia. Which one is it?
I don't know.
It's nostalgia.
You say nostalgia. I say nostalgia. Okay.
It's like when Aaron, my wife,
Nevada, I say Nevada.
I say Nevada, and then when Aaron and I have people over and do you want a piece of pecan pie, and she's like pecan, and I'm like pecan. Pecan.
Pecan. I'm with the wife on that one. Okay.
Nostalgia. It's nostalgia. Now you're not going to even be able to say it.
I'm not going to change who I am. I've been saying nostalgia.
Good. You should not. You're old anyway. So, you can't change.
Oh, thank you. I'm in denial. So nostalgia, remembering the good old days, and wanting to think that the best future is a return to the past. Is that maybe one way of looking at it?
I agree. And this is the one that I think needs a little clarity, because nostalgia, hubris in and of itself, bad. Denial in and of itself, bad. Nostalgia in and of itself, not necessarily bad. Just because you have yearnings and longings for yesteryear does not mean that you're in a place of sin or that you're in a wrong place. I think everyone is nostalgic to a point. It's when you want to push nostalgia as if it's where the church needs to be today. And anytime I hear this, I'll just ask people the question, does God save people in the past? And the answer, of course, is no. Does God save people in the future? Well, yes, of course he will. So you can never lead a church, and nor should a church desire or even have a culture of wanting to be in the past or longing for the past, because God's not going to save people in the past, but he will save people in the future. And that's why you have to push away from nostalgia. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you lead with nostalgia, it can take your church into a place where you're not doing gospel work.
That's well said. Okay. The dictionary has two pronunciations.
You were looking that up while I was talking. I love how you said that's well said, and you didn't hear a word I was saying.
I heard every word you said, but I looked it up, and I don't know which one of these of the two, because both of ours are there, is going to use for the audio. So I have not punched the audio yet. So let's see which one it has. Come on. Nostalgia.
I say nostalgia.
Well,
we'll let the viewers, we'll let the listeners and the viewers decide.
Here you go. Let's go.
Nostalgia.
Nostalgia. Okay. Just yours is there, but it's secondary.
Okay.
I'm primary.
Well, that's the way that's just the way it works at Church Answers.
Okay. Now I can feel a little more comfortable saying nostalgia. Yes, Sam, I did listen to what you were saying, even as I was multitasking, looking to see what the correct definition, because I don't like bad grammar. I don't like mispronunciations of things. And if I did it on our own show, I would be a little bit uncomfortable doing that. But you're right. And God is saving in the future. I did have that. God is saving in the present. And I know you're not getting theologically precise here, but if God is saved in the past, that's already happened, at least from the human perspective within time, space and time. Right. So I heard every word you're saying.
Yeah, but if you long for the church of the 1970s, okay, I get it. I mean, I understand. I have some fondness for the 1990s. I don't necessarily want to go back there, but that's the era I grew up in. So I'm nostalgic in some ways, but I can't lead my church into the 90s. Because it's done and it's over with. You have to lead the church into the future.
Well, in many of my interviews in this church where I was doing a consultation in a state that I won't mention, and it is a first church, I'm not going to even mention the denomination, many of the comments that were made, if only we, and it's usually a program, if only we did, and they talk about the denominational program, then the church would be fine. They were going back to the 90s. Is their ideal time, and the consultation was done in 2022.
Yeah.
So that one of the things, will this church make it? It depends. I mean, that's one of my favorite answers, but it does depend. It depends on if they're going to stay in the past and seek the past, or if they're willing to move forward to the future. And this is a question that I think most churches have before them today.
I agree. Hubris, denial, and nostalgia.
Now you're making me sound like I have a twang to it. Well, thank y'all for putting up with the intra-family feud here, family feud going on between two reigners. And Amy and Akeem are looking on saying, I wish they'd just get back to the content. We always want to thank Tyndale for their sponsorship. Great partnership. I'd rather call them a partner than a sponsor. I want to talk just a moment about the Immersed Bible. There's a growing body of evidence that most Christians today are struggling to connect to the Bible. We know that. And the Immersed reading experience takes you on a new and unique journey through the Bible. It delivers scripture as it's originally meant without chapter or verse breaks. I know Sam has had some of his, men's group.
I love the Immersed Bible. We got guys who had never read the Bible on their own reading the Bible through Immerse. It was I participated in this group. Obviously, I can't participate in every group in the church, but I participated in this group, and I had a blast. The Immersed Bible was incredible for our church.
No chapters, no verses, long form reading, has a feel of a paperback book. Of course, it's in the New Living Translation, which we just announced had moved up to number 2.
Oh, I was wondering if you're going to go there, because we're going to do some specials on this. There's some things that we want to say about the movement of where translations are ranked in terms of sales. But NLT is now number 2. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yep. And seems like it's continuing to have momentum. We'll see if it gets to that number 1 spot. Immerse, a great Bible to read. Friends reading the same passage, coming together. Use this unique edition. Members can read through the section of the Bible like the New Testament, or in an 8 or 16 week plan. So just go to it. You can look at the show notes. We strongly recommend not only the NLT, but the Immersed Bible for the NLT. As always, thank you for joining us today on Rainer on Leadership. Be sure to watch us on YouTube. Give us a like on YouTube. Give us a subscribe. Google Podcasts, Spotify. You've got a lot of podcasting outs out there. iTunes is very common. And join us online at churchanswers.com, where we are growing healthy churches together.